There was a man in every black neighborhood in the 1970s who could fix anything, and I mean anything. A broken washing machine, a leaking roof, a car engine that sounded like it was auditioning for a horror movie. He did not call anyone. He did not Google anything. He just went to his toolbox, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. That man was somebody's father, somebody's grandfather, somebody's uncle who showed up on Saturday mornings smelling like motor oil and possibility. And what he knew, what he carried in those hands, was a kind of knowledge that this generation has almost completely forgotten. Hi, my name is James, and this is Soulful Nostalgia. The philosophy of fixing. Before we talk about the how, we have to talk about the why. Because understanding why black men in the 1970s fixed everything themselves tells you something deep about who they were and what they believed. These were men who had grown up watching their fathers and grandfathers make something out of nothing. They had seen women stretch $1 until it begged for mercy. They had been raised in a tradition that said, "You do not wait for someone else to solve your problem. You solve it yourself. Full stop." But there was something else underneath all of that. Something that does not get talked about enough. Calling a repairman cost money that most families simply did not have. A plumber in the 1970s could charge more than a full day's wages for a job that took 45 minutes. An appliance repair company could quote you a number that made you want to sit down and collect yourself before you could even respond. And on top of the money, there was the matter of dignity. Inviting strangers into your home to fix things you believed you were capable of fixing yourself felt like admitting defeat. These men did not admit defeat. They admitted that the washing machine was broken, and then they fixed the washing machine. The philosophy was not complicated. It was just deeply held. You own it, you maintain it, you break it, you repair it. And if you do not know how to fix it yet, you figure it out. Because figuring it out is what men in this tradition did. The sacred toolbox. Every black household in the 1970s had one. That big metal toolbox, usually red or silver, beat up on the outside from years of use, heavy enough that children were not supposed to pick it up, which of course meant every child tried to pick it up at least once. That toolbox was not just a container for tools. It was a statement. It was proof that the man of the house was prepared, that nothing was going to break down in this home and stay broken, that problems had solutions, and solutions lived in that box. Open it up, and you would find things that told a whole story. Flathead screwdrivers and Phillips heads in 3 different sizes. A hammer with a handle worn smooth from decades of use. Pliers that could grip things regular hands could not. A socket wrench set that was never complete because one of the kids had borrowed a socket and not put it back. And if you ever touched Daddy's tools and did not put them back exactly where you found them, well, let us just say you learned that lesson one time and never needed to learn it again. There was electrical tape wrapped around everything. A level for hanging pictures and checking floor repairs. Sandpaper in different grits. A handsaw that had been sharpened more times than anyone could count. Some toolboxes had compartments that folded out like wings when you opened the lid, revealing smaller tools nested inside. Children stood and watched in pure amazement the first time they saw those layers unfold, like a magic trick that ended with a pair of needle nose pliers. That toolbox represented readiness, and readiness was a form of love. Fixing the car in the driveway. If you grew up black in the 1970s, Saturday morning had a soundtrack, and part of that soundtrack was the sound of a car hood going up in the driveway before 8 in the morning. Fathers rose early on Saturdays with a specific purpose. The car needed an oil change, or the brakes were grinding, or there was a knocking sound coming from somewhere under the hood that had been quietly discussed at the dinner table all week. Saturday was the day you handled it. The driveway became a workshop. An old shower curtain or a flattened cardboard box went down on the concrete so a man could slide underneath the car without destroying his clothes. A coffee can sat nearby to catch old oil. The specific coffee can that had been designated for this exact purpose and was never to be confused with the coffee can in the kitchen that held emergency money. Those were two very different cans, and mixing them up was a serious situation. Children were allowed to watch from a respectful distance, close enough to hand over a tool when asked, far enough not to be in the way. And if you were the child chosen to hold the flashlight, you understood the weight of that responsibility. You held that light perfectly still. You did not let it waver, because if the light moved at the wrong moment, there would be consequences that were not worth describing. Fathers talked while they worked, not to anyone in particular, just out loud to the car, telling it what was wrong with it, explaining what was about to happen to it, occasionally saying words that children were not supposed to repeat and absolutely did repeat at school the following Monday. Changing your own oil, replacing brake pads, swapping out a water pump, rebuilding a carburetor. These were not considered impressive skills. They were considered basic. You owned a car. You maintained a car. Paying someone else to do what you were capable of doing yourself was money that could have gone towards something that actually mattered. Plumbing with no license. The pipe under the kitchen sink started leaking on a Tuesday. By Saturday, it was fixed. No plumber was called. No invoice was generated. A man simply went to the hardware store, bought the parts he needed, came home, and handled it. Black men in the 1970s had a relationship with plumbing that defied every licensing board in America. They could not tell you the technical name for half the fittings they installed, but those fittings did not leak. And sometimes that is the only credential that matters. Toilets that ran constantly were silenced. Faucets that dripped all night were tightened into compliance. Water heaters were relit when the pilot went out. Drain clogs were attacked with a plunger first, a wire hanger straightened into a hook second, and a combination of baking soda and vinegar third, before anyone even considered spending money on a chemical solution. There was a particular pride in fixing plumbing, because plumbing is the kind of work that happens behind walls and under floors. Nobody sees it. Nobody compliments it. You do it because it needs to be done, and because you are the one responsible for making sure it gets done. That quiet, unwitnessed competence was its own reward. Wives knew better than to ask how long it would take. The answer was always almost done, even if almost done meant 2 more hours and a second trip to the hardware store. Electrical work, nobody certified. Now, I want to be careful here, because I am not encouraging anyone to go stick their fingers in an outlet. But I would be telling an incomplete story if I did not acknowledge what Black fathers in the 1970s did with electrical work in their own homes. They replaced outlets. They swapped out light switches. They ran new wire when a room needed an additional circuit. They installed ceiling fans before ceiling fans came with instruction booklets that had 37 steps and a warning label in 4 languages. The process usually involved flipping the breaker, testing the wire with a screwdriver that had a small bulb in the handle that glowed when current was present, and then working with calm, methodical precision. No panic, no drama, just a man who had watched someone else do this once and paid close enough attention to replicate it. The knowledge was not formal, it was inherited and observed. A father watched his father. A son watched his father. The electrical panel was not a mystery to be feared. It was a system to be understood. And look, yes, there were occasional moments where a breaker was tripped unexpectedly and someone came running from another room, asking if everyone was all right. And the answer was always, yes, fine, go back inside. Because admitting anything else was simply not an option. The roof and the gutters, twice a year without fail, the latter came out. Spring and fall. Up onto the roof to check for damage, clear the gutters, replace any shingles that had shifted or cracked through the season. This was not a discussion. It was a schedule. Black men in the 1970s treated home maintenance the way athletes treat conditioning. You did not wait until something failed. You stayed ahead of failure, because failure in a home you owned meant expenses you could not afford, and damage that spread if you ignored it. Gutters clogged with leaves were cleaned out by hand into a bucket, then flushed with a garden hose to make sure water flowed freely to the downspout. Shingles that had lifted at the edge were pressed back down and nailed. Flashing around the chimney was inspected and resealed with roofing tar when necessary. Children watched from the yard below, partly out of curiosity, and partly because somebody had been told to watch and make sure Daddy did not fall off the roof. This was a legitimate assigned duty. You stood there and you watched. And you felt the strange mixture of pride and terror that came from seeing your father walk around on a sloped roof with the confidence of someone who simply had not considered the possibility of falling. The roof was the crown of the house, and the man who maintained his crown understood something about stewardship that no contractor could teach him. Appliance repair as a love language. The washing machine stopped spinning on a Wednesday. By Thursday evening, it was running again. Not because a repairman came, because a father pulled it away from the wall, disconnected it, took the back panel off, and spent 2 hours diagnosing what was wrong before driving to a parts store and coming home with exactly what was needed. Appliance repair in Black households during the 1970s was practically its own dialect of love. When a man fixed the refrigerator that kept the family's food cold, he was saying something that went far beyond the mechanical. He was saying, I see what this family needs, and I am capable of providing it. He was saying nothing in this house stays broken on my watch. The television was a particular point of pride. In the 1970s, televisions were expensive. A color television set represented a significant investment, and when the picture went fuzzy or the sound cut out, the first response was never to go shopping for a replacement. The first response was to troubleshoot. Fathers would remove the back panel of the television set and look inside at the tubes and the wiring with an expression of deep concentration. They would check connections. They would tap things gently. Sometimes they would find the problem, and sometimes they would find a different problem they did not know existed. But eventually, through a combination of knowledge, intuition, and sheer refusal to give up, the television would come back to life. The family would gather back around it like nothing had happened. Because in their household, fixing things was not extraordinary. It was just what you did. Dryers that stopped heating, refrigerators that stopped cooling, dishwashers that stopped draining. Each one met the same response. Not a phone call. A toolbox. Furniture making and woodworking. Some of what sat in Black homes during the 1970s was not bought from a store. It was built by hand in garages and backyards and on weekend afternoons when a man had time and lumber and an idea he wanted to bring into the world. Bookshelves were built to fit exact wall dimensions. Workbenches were constructed in garages with enough surface area to hold every project that might come along. Toy chests were assembled for children with lids that closed softly so little fingers would not get caught. Porch swings were crafted and hung with chains that swayed gently on summer evenings. The woodworking tradition connected Black men in the 1970s to something ancient and dignified. The ability to take raw material and shape it into something useful and beautiful was a skill that required patience, precision, and a kind of creative thinking that formal education did not always reward. Wood was measured twice and cut once. That rule was not optional. Cutting a board too short was a lesson that cost money and produced language that made grandmothers close their eyes and say a quick prayer. So you measured twice, and then you measured one more time just to be sure. Sanding was done in stages, moving from coarse to fine until the surface was smooth enough that no one would ever get a splinter. Staining and finishing completed the transformation from raw wood to finished piece, and when it was done, when that bookshelf or that chest or that porch swing stood complete, there was a satisfaction in it that no store purchase could ever produce. Teaching the son. This is the chapter that matters most, because all of this knowledge, every skill and every technique and every hard-won lesson was only as valuable as the generation it was passed down to. Black fathers in the 1970s understood something that is easy to forget in an era of YouTube tutorials and professional services. They understood that teaching a son to fix things was not about the things. It was about the son. It started early. A boy of 6 or 7 was brought into the garage not to help, but to watch. He stood nearby and observed. He learned the names of tools before he was allowed to touch them. He understood what a torque wrench was and why the socket set had to stay organized before he ever turned a bolt himself. Then came the day when the father handed over the wrench and stepped back. Let the boy try, did not rush in to correct every small mistake, watched with patience while young hands fumbled with a connection that skilled hands could have completed in 30 seconds. Because the fumbling was part of the education. The fumbling built the muscle memory and the problem-solving instinct that smooth, easy success could never produce. Fathers talked during these sessions. They explained not just what they were doing, but why. Why this bolt needed to be torqued to a specific tightness. Why you always disconnect the battery before working on any electrical component in a car. Why you clean your tools before you put them away and not after you take them out next time. They told stories too, about their own fathers showing them these same things. About the first time they fixed a car alone and it actually worked. About the time they tried to fix something and made it significantly worse before they made it better, which they described with a level of humor that only comes from having enough distance from the disaster to laugh at it. Sons carried these lessons forward, not just as knowledge, but as identity. Knowing how to fix things meant knowing who you were. It meant you were capable. It meant you were self-reliant. It meant that when something broke in your own home someday, you would not be helpless. You would be ready. Why they never called a repairman? Let us be completely honest about something. The decision not to call a repairman was made up of several layers, and pretending it was purely about pride would be telling only part of the truth. Money was the first layer. A black family in the 1970s was likely working with a budget that had been calculated to the dollar. Unexpected repair bills did not fit into that calculation. When the choice was between paying a plumber and making sure there was enough food for the week, there was no real choice. You fixed the plumbing yourself. But underneath the money was something that ran deeper. Black men of that generation carried the awareness that they existed in a society that did not always see them as competent, as capable, as worthy of the same respect granted to others without question. And every time a man fixed his own roof or rebuilt his own engine or rewired his own outlet, he was answering that unspoken insult with his hands. There was no audience for most of this work. Nobody gave awards for unclogging your own drain or replacing your own alternator. The community knew, the family knew, and the man himself knew, and that internal knowledge. That quiet certainty of I can handle whatever this house and this life throws at me was a form of dignity that no paycheck and no outside validation could provide. Calling a repairman for something you were capable of fixing yourself felt like surrendering a piece of that dignity. And these men did not surrender easily. They had not been built that way. The neighborhood as a workshop. Here is something that gets lost when we tell this story as if it were only about individual men and their individual households. It was never just individual. It was community. Black neighborhoods in the 1970s functioned as informal networks of shared expertise. The man 3 houses down, who was brilliant with engines, would come help when your transmission started slipping. The neighbor across the street, who had spent 20 years doing construction work, would walk over and assess your foundation concern before you spent money on an inspection. The deacon from church, who happened to know everything about electrical systems, would stop by on a Saturday afternoon and give you a second opinion on the wiring you had just finished. Tools were lent without paperwork. Knowledge was shared without charge. If a man was working on something difficult, word would spread quietly, and somebody with relevant experience would find a reason to wander by and take a look. This was not organized. It was not planned. It was simply the natural behavior of a community that understood interdependence. Every man brought something. Every man received something. The neighborhood was a workshop with no walls and no membership fee, and the only qualification for entry was showing up willing to help. Children absorbed this too. They watched how men interacted around work, how they deferred to each other's expertise without embarrassment, how asking for help from someone who knew more than you was not weakness but wisdom, how giving that help freely without keeping score was simply what neighbors did. That informal network of skill sharing was one of the most powerful and underappreciated institutions in Black community life during that era. What we lost when this generation left. I want to take a moment here because this part deserves to be said carefully and honestly. That generation of Black men, the ones who fixed everything themselves, who taught their sons through doing, who built community networks of skill and knowledge, they are leaving us. Some are already gone, and with them, something irreplaceable is walking out the door. It is not just the specific skills, though the skills matter. It is the entire philosophy that produced those skills. The belief that you are responsible for your own home, that ownership carries obligation, that knowing how to do something for yourself is a form of freedom that nobody can take from you, that patience, practice, and the refusal to give up in the face of a broken thing are virtues worth cultivating and passing down. The generation that came after them inherited comfortable lives in many ways, more access, more options, more resources than their fathers had. And those are genuinely good things. Nobody should be nostalgic for hardship, but somewhere in the acquisition of those comforts, something else was quietly set down and not picked back up. Young men today can pull out a phone and have someone come fix almost anything within the hour. And there is nothing wrong with that. But there is also something lost when the idea of fixing something yourself feels foreign. When the toolbox in the garage is mostly decorative. When the first response to any broken thing is to replace it rather than repair it. The men we are talking about did not fix things because they had no other options. They fixed things because they believed it mattered to be the kind of man who could fix things. That belief was not about showing off. It was about character. It was about what you owed your family and your community and yourself. When those men sat down with their sons and said, "Let me show you how this works," they were doing something that went far beyond mechanics. They were transmitting a way of moving through the world. A way that said, "I am not helpless. I am not dependent. I am capable and prepared, and I will pass that capability on to the people who come after me." That is the thing we lost. Not just the knowledge of how to change a water heater or rebuild a carburetor or replace a circuit breaker. We lost the culture that said this knowledge is sacred enough to sit down and teach. Some families kept it. Some fathers made sure their children knew. Some sons paid attention when the hood went up on Saturday morning. And for those families, something of that original fire is still burning. But for too many households, that toolbox sits closed. That knowledge went unshared. And the generation that carried it is passing on, taking with them a philosophy of self-reliance and quiet dignity that we will not see the like of again unless we make a conscious, deliberate decision to bring it back. And I believe we can. I believe that somewhere in the men who are watching this right now, there is a memory, a Saturday morning in a driveway, a smell of motor oil, a father's voice explaining something patiently for the third time because you did not quite get it the first two. A heavy toolbox being set down on concrete with a sound that meant work was about to happen. That memory is not just nostalgia, it is instruction. It is an invitation to pick up what was set down and carry it forward. That is what this community is built on. Not just the remembering, but the understanding of what those memories are trying to tell us. The men we talked about today were not superheroes. They were fathers and neighbors and uncles who decided that capability was a value worth living by. If this brought back memories for you, drop a comment below. Tell me about the man in your life who fixed everything. Tell me what he taught you. Tell me what you wish you had learned. Hit that like button, subscribe to Soulful Nostalgia, and come back next time because we are just getting started.